So today, top 10 fails using Tropic Marin salts. This is one of those areas where you can absolutely use the wrong tool, use it in the wrong way, and actually get less than desirable results. So there's 4 different salts here. Most salts actually don't have that option. They're all just kind of generic all-for-one options. Here, you're gonna find out today how you can learn from our failures to get the right tool, right job, and use it the right way. All right, so number 1 here is actually don't watch this video, watch something else.
Yeah, so the mistake is not watching Robert's interview with Lou over at Tropic Marin. This is on our Facebook, our Ask BRStv Facebook group, and there is a breakdown from Lou himself on exactly what the job and role of each of these are, more in depth than we're gonna cover today.
So we're gonna highlight it. You'll probably get the like 80-20 of this, the 80% that is the most valuable. But if you wanna really get in the depth of it, go to Ask BRStv, find the learning units, and watch Robert's interview with Lou. So number 2, we're getting at the difference between the Classic and the Pro. Why would you want one of them over the other?
Yeah, so, and that's the mistake, is not understanding when the Pro is the right tool, and it really comes down to like natural seawater levels.
Yeah, so they're almost identical. There's only like one difference here, and it's calcium and alkalinity levels. The alkalinity level in the Pro is 7, which is closer to natural seawater levels, and the calcium is 440. So if that is close to the levels that you would like, this is the right option. So number 3 is actually, when is Classic the right option?
Yeah, and that is the mistake, not understanding when this Classic is the right tool. And in this case, it's higher alkalinity, lower calcium, so 9 to 10 DKH for alkalinity, and about 380 for calcium, but for a purpose.
So you'll notice lower calcium here, higher alkalinity, and that's the inverse of these two. So at the face value, just pick the one as close to the levels that you want to take, but you'll notice that they might be different than what you actually have in your tank, and that's because both of these salts are designed to be able to be stored long term, mix it up, be able to do auto water changes, mix up a batch, store it for a month. We don't want precipitation in the buckets, and this is actually designed in your tank to produce less precipitation as well. I know as reefers we tend to push the limits a little bit and raise it up, and sometimes you'll end up with a little bit of precipitation in the tank because we're maintaining higher levels. So for me, I'm actually maintaining something closer to about 440 calcium and a 9 DKH, which is the high range of both of these. And in my case, I personally just go with the Pro here, and then I add a little bit of alkalinity with sodium bicarbonate, either directly in the tank or in the mixing, just because it's actually easier. It takes a smaller dose to correct this than it does calcium, and it's actually cheaper. And in fact, that might be one of the reasons why Classic is just a few bucks cheaper, because the calcium chloride is actually one of the more expensive components that goes into this, especially in a high quality calcium chloride. So that's the difference between these two. Both of them can be stored for a very, very long time, as long as you're not like doing anything silly like aerating them. So just store them for a long time. They both work great. Just pick the levels. Other than that, they're almost identical. All right, so number 4. We're stepping outside the normal salt universe, trying to find that progress that's left on the table that other people aren't doing. What is number 4?
So number 4 is not understanding when Bioactif is the right tool. Just like these ones, there's a difference between all 3. There's a difference between all 4. Bioactif is actually Pro Reef mixed with some Reef Actif and about 1 point higher DKH.
Yeah, so the Bioactif or the Reef Actif, if you did it separately, is a carbon dosing. So it's a biopolymer that's in there that is designed to feed bacteria, which will reduce nitrate and phosphate in your tank, but it will also turn that nitrate and phosphate into a bacteria food source for the corals as well. So some of it will be stripped out via the protein skimmer, and some of it will actually be consumed by the living organisms, being your corals in the tank. So this is actually, you know, a much easier method for somebody who wants to do carbon dosing but doesn't want to, like, you know, play mad scientist, just dumping it in, hoping for the best.
Yeah, and in addition to that, this is one, because it has those those bio Reef Actif and things like that, those biopolymers. It's not made for storage. It's not made for auto water changes. They actually suggest using it within 24 to 36 hours.
So fail is absolutely, or a mistake, is trying to store this. So you do not want to store it. And also in relation to this one is you're going to see initially it should have just a tiny bit of haze to it. These will mix crystal clear. You've seen it in all Randy's Investigates.
Yes.
This one will have a tiny haze to it, but what they say is that haze from the biopolymers and bacteria, once they populate and strip out the nutrients, it actually make the water clearer than ever before. So a totally different solution to a problem you may not even know you had, and make it a lot easier to do something like carbon dosing and solve all of those problems. Bioactif and Reef Actif and Bioactif, you can do them separately, but it's all in this one. All right, so number 5, it's time to step outside your comfort zone, expand the world that maybe we know, maybe find some of the progress, but really there's a little bit of a leap of faith here because this is something brand new to a lot of people.
Yeah, so the mistake, just like the other 3, is understanding or not understanding when Syn-Biotic is the right salt. There's some similarities to a few of these, but this one is more different, I'd say, than the rest. It has additional bacteria for some specific purposes, and Lou actually says it's a great salt to start your tank with.
Yeah, this is actually this one with the probiotics added to it and other bacteria. So it has a nitrifier and denitrifying bacteria, which makes it good for starting a new tank. It has the probiotics in there, which they tell us is good for the fish. I've never needed to add probiotics, but like I also don't really know. So this is interesting, that an evolution of the knowledge here of adding probiotics to tank to help the digestive tract. But also something totally different I've never heard before either, purple bacteria.
Yeah, the purple bacteria is said to break down the hydrogen sulfide and turn it into less toxic sulfate and sulfur, in which case this is one of the only salts that I've seen there that I've heard of that has that in it.
All right, so this is final frontier salt. They're pushing the limits of what we all know. Maybe we'll learn something from that. So I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to know that both of these shouldn't be stored. You do an auto water change, you should use these in 24 to 36 hours. You now know the benefits of each one. You can look for those benefits. These are the 2 salts that you've seen in all Randy's Investigates. This is the one that I use right here in my own tank. But you now know the right tool, right job, what they're supposed to do, and how to use them. All right, so number 6, though, is actually applies to all salts, but you can apply it here too.
Yeah, so the mistake here is expecting your test kits to be perfect at matching the or testing the levels in some of these. So you might mix up some Pro Reef and you say, hey, it's supposed to be 7 DKH, it's supposed to be 440 calcium, but my test kit didn't say that. The salt's messed up.
Yeah, I don't know. None of these things are perfect. Some of them stratify over time when they're traveling around the world. So it might actually be 7.5.
Could be your test kit.
But just as easy, it could be the procedure, your test kit. We did fails on test kits just a little bit ago, and you can see that it's a procedure. So don't get too hung up on 7.5 because the test kits are only hobby grade, and it's real. Sometimes you see a little bit of stratification in the mixing of the salt. The ideal component here is just to be close. Number 7, we kind of hit on this already, but we're going to drive it home. And it's thinking large batches, which ones are good for that?
Yeah, so the mistake is not knowing which salts you can mix in large batches ahead of time, so in advance, and then storage too. This is the main component of why we use these, because we have big storage vats that feed auto water changes. So these are the salts for us, but that might not be you, and you want to take advantage of some of these other ones.
Yeah, so here's the deal. The reason I brought this up again is because you saw it in all Randy's Investigates. He did months longs of tests on finding out which salts store the best, which ones don't have precipitation issues. And not only because it's pharmaceutical grade, it doesn't have all that crud in it, but because the levels they've chosen here is part of why it stores so much better. So some of the salts out there might actually match your exact numbers you're looking for in your reef tank, but they might not be good options if you're looking to mix up a month's worth of salt and not have a bunch of precipitation and crud in there, where the first time I do a water change, I have a DKH of 10, but the second time I do it, it's 6. So pay attention, and nobody really wants to test their water change all the time. We did all the testing for you to find that out. So these are some of the best options for storing. Another one, a lot of you guys make this mistake, even though we've been drilling at home for years.
Yeah, so the mistake is mixing water to your salt. You just don't want to add water to the powder directly and try to fill up a bin. There's a whole bunch of issues that can arise from that. Water first, then salt.
That includes actually mixing half the water, dumping in all the salt, and adding half more water over time. What's going to happen is it's going to get super concentrated. You're going to have a big cloudy mess of precipitation. And even if you don't see the cloudy mess because it's dark in your basement or garage, it probably did happen. Your calcium alkalinity levels dropped. So make sure you have all the water you need, then add the salt to the water, and you'll get the best results. Number 9. Trace element conversation. Are water changes enough?
Yeah, and so that is the mistake, is missing Tropic Marin's advice on when water changes aren't enough for trace elements. There's trace elements in here, but it'll only take you so far, and they explain that to you.
It's actually both sides of that conversation. So a lot of times the manufacturer is just trying to sell you more, products, more trace elements, more better, right? Not in this case. Actually, in this case, they're putting the trace elements here to begin with, and it's not fuzzy language like all important ones, like some of the cheaper ones out there. They're actually putting them in here so that water changes do work. And so the advice that they tell you is probably for the first year, if not 2 years, doing water changes is an adequate solution. And again, adequate because they're actually in here to begin with. And it's only after that point when the corals start to go from tiny little frags to robust colonies and you're filled out your tank that no longer doing the water change is an adequate solution. So now you need to start adding the A and K to your 2-part or whatever other solution that you might like. But it's actually a really interesting point that, the tank, your methods and practices need to grow with the tank, and you know that the consumption of these elements are going way up because the corals are much bigger, so you need to adapt. But for the first 2 years, water changes are an adequate solution. All right, number 10, not directly related to these salt buckets here, but actually really, really cool. You should watch this.
Yeah, so we take advice from Lou, who's over at Tropic Marin, on these salts, on all the Tropic Marin lines, so it's a mistake to not go watch Lou's MACNA talk. Now, here's a couple of them out there, but the most recent one is his best.
Yeah, that one actually was one of the most watched MACNA talks of all of them. So you learn something about chemistry for sure, so you should go check it out. All right, so if there's only one thing you learned today, let it be this.
Yeah, for me, it's tempering your expectations on using these Bioactif and Syn-Biotic salts. You're not going to be able to store them for a long time. You shouldn't store them for a long time. If that's what you need, there's a better tool.
I mean, you stole it right out of my mouth. So I'm going to use the same one. Actually, if you're going to store salt, and a lot of us are doing that nowadays with auto water changes, and even before that, I like to mix up a month's worth of salt at a time so I didn't have to keep making it over and over again. Now that I know that there's an option designed specifically for that, these are the two, right tool, right job. So if you want to check out all these salts and actually the whole line of Tropic Marin, you can do that right here.